Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Military Monday show. With every first Monday, we get to chat with military historian Mike Guardia. He's an award-winning author, as I said, military historian, U.S. Army veteran, educator, author of the year by the Military Writers Society of America. And I think it's over how many books now, Mike? And like, welcome,
25.
by the way, but 25.
Uh-huh.
So one a year? No, that's not what's
amazing.
happening with you. That's pretty cool. 25 books. His latest is Coyote Recon, The Forgotten Wars of Colonel J.D. Vanderpool. The one before that is The Combat Diaries, True Stories from the Front Lines of World War II. He is also on the History Channel series, I Was There. And I believe more is coming on the History Channel.
Yes, ma'am. So we have Military
Cool.
Mysteries, which is going to be debuting sometime this spring, if I'm not mistaken. And that is a show that's going to be on the History Channel, focusing on a variety of military operations that were either mysterious in their conception or mysterious in how they played out, or the end result was just so far beyond what anyone expected that there's more to the surface, or there's more under the surface than really anyone knows what's truly going on.
Okay, so more to the surface. I want to know, we just did a recording with you that aired on our Big Daily Blend show on Spotify. So only on Spotify, every day it's there. You said you ran the steps, the Rocky steps. You did it.
I did.
How did you do it? Like, what is more, like, when people think they're going to do it, like, how, like, more to the surface, how do you know you can do it? Like, without throwing up halfway? You know what I mean? What do you, we want a tip. I know we're talking about presidential history, but seriously, this, like, Rocky's a president, right?
President of the WBC, maybe, but
I know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just
President
kidding. I'm
of
just
what?
kidding. Hey, Nancy went to hypnotism class with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh,
She
no
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
Because he went there because he think faster than he could speak.
Mhm.
And that really helped him to be able to hypnotize himself so he could gel two parts of his mind together.
Mhm.
And it seemed to really help him. But he was pretty funny in class, I have to say.
Yeah.
I quite liked him.
Oh, of course you did. I know.
Well, no, because he was very personable and not at all egotistical. And he really was trying hard to calm his mind down. So, because he said his mind interrupted when he was trying to speak, his mind would interrupt with so many things that he looked as if he couldn't speak, but it's just that he had so much to say, and so he had to learn to calm down his mind so he could speak. It's interesting,
I need to go do that, man. Yeah, because I just try to get it all out 24/7, man. I got all this
But
stuff in
no,
my
but
head.
it's
cool.
quite a lot of people have issues like that, and they're hypnotism, at least for him, seemed to really work.
I wonder about that in martial arts. Like, when you think about Rocky and you think about, like, the Jean-Claude Van Damme show, like, movies, right? Remember those, Mike? Do you know which ones I'm talking about? Like, it
Oh,
was
of
always
course.
about meditation, martial arts and meditation, hand in hand, right? That if you
Yeah.
got into that zone, you could do anything and you could
Focus.
kick butt.
Yeah.
So, like, I
Yeah,
know
move
we're
to
going
the
to
blood
presidential
sport and
history. We'll get there.
kickboxing.
Yeah, but I mean, kickboxer. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I know, but those, like, as a kid, when we watched those movies, we're like, oh, we could calm ourselves. We can do this. We can make this happen. But it was about centering yourself And I wonder, and I'll get into that with presidents, but going up those steps, did you have to do that? Did you have to like get into the zone to go up those steps and not, or I mean, did you go all the way up? Did you stop? I want to know. Like
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I was already excited to be there. And I mean, I was already in pretty good shape. I mean, I was in the military. So I was already running a lot. And, just, I think the combination of me being so pumped up to recreate that iconic scene and me already being one who was exercising regularly, I think that just made for it to be a really pleasant experience. I mean, I remember when I got to the top, I was just really excited, and I thought, "Hey, man, I think I've crossed off one of the ultimate items on anybody's bucket list. I ran the stairs at the Philadelphia Art Museum just like Rocky Balboa did."
Wow.
So yeah, it was a natural high, and I think it in a lot of ways it was incredibly therapeutic because you feel like you've become some part of American cultural and cinematic history, if that makes sense. It's like,
That's
I'm here.
interesting.
Yes, it's like I'm here at ground zero where Sylvester Stallone himself made this the cultural icon what it is today, and now I'm feeling like I'm taking part in it, even if it's been like, I think at that point it was well more than 30 years after the original Rocky had come out. You're just thinking to yourself, man, yeah, this is cool. I can share in a part of this now. Yeah.
That, I think there's something iconic about that. And you think about Philadelphia, right? So much history. We've got Benjamin Franklin, we've got presidential history. So I'm going to go into that.
Yeah.
But there's something about that. And we've talked about this on shows with you before about the importance of a president being part of the military, because it's something that you look up to, just like Rocky, right?
Right.
Like that's why I said it's presidential in a way, because you go like, he was such a badass. Like, he looked at what he did, Rocky. And John-Claude Van Damme, I'm sorry, like I had a crush on him when I was a kid. Like he was like, anyway, he, just saying he was. And when you think about showing what they went through to get there, and when we look at presidents, we want to know, how did you get to be president? Did you fight, or was it, campaign contributions and all that political stuff we really don't want to talk about? But if you actually did something and served in some way, that is to me very important. I think, Nancy, and I think for everybody in this country and around the world for their presidents. Like right now, I look at Ukraine. Wouldn't you think that Ukraine's president is doing the best he can in his situation? What would you think? Or should we not talk about that? I don't know.
Well, no, I think he is doing the best he can, and I think that he has done comparatively more than what most contemporary leaders either have done or would be willing to do if they were in the same situation. I mean, here was a guy who flat out refused to flee Ukrainian airspace, despite the fact that there were some within the international community who were urging him to flee Ukraine by helicopter. So the fact that he stood there and stayed and is very much involved in the day-to-day fighting and the day-to-day planning of the operations. I say that puts him easily in the top tier of world leaders throughout history. I mean, you have people on both sides of the conflict who can give their opinions and analyses of why the conflict started when it did, who was responsible, who said what, or who did what. But when you get past all that jawboning and you just look at the men who are in the arena fighting it in real time, the fact that the leader, like the president of Ukraine, when you look at a leader like him who is as involved and has the amount of resilience that he does, I mean, that's that's certainly something that we can all draw a lot of inspiration from, I think, because, you know, if you look at other conflicts, even going back to the latter part of the 20th century, you know, if somewhere, you know, if some place on the globe gets invaded, you know, the high echelon decision makers are normally the ones who are either fleeing or they're being highly encouraged to flee and carry on the fight by some other means from outside the borders of where
Right.
the enemy occupation is currently taking place. So yeah, I'd say the world needs to pay attention and you know, maybe take a few lessons from what's happening on the ground.
That's awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
that's somebody who stands by his word. Like,
Mhm.
he, you know, and I look at someone like that, and I would much prefer a president that does what he says he's going to do, and he means it in his heart and soul, and it's life is in it, as opposed to someone who just talks about it.
Mm,
Yeah, and
exactly.
I have a lot of respect for him because he's man, he's not messing around. He's in it and
No,
he's living it. And that's a far cry from sitting in some fancy home talking about it.
Mhm.
that's right.
Well, so, you know, this is the thing about you saying about getting the boots on the ground, like getting in there. And that's where I think I know it's President's Day weekend coming up, or President's Weekend, whatever you want to call it, coming up. And, you know, right now, politically, the country just, if you say president, I don't care what president you're talking about, we kind of have a, like, whatever, you know, so there's a frustration, obviously, right, across the country about what's going on politically and whatever. But
Right.
I want to get to the point is, like, we have real issues. We do have conflicts happening around the world and things that are threatening our country all the time. And we've talked about this, where it's really cool to have a president who has served, who actually understands the military and how it works. And I think that even helps even with budgeting issues and understanding, you know, don't just throw money and not know where it's going and how it's going to really help. Like, money needs to go in the right places, right?
Right.
So when we look at presidents, I know you've got a couple you want to talk about. We all do. But you brought up JFK and the PT 109. So what is the PT 109? Sounds like a cool car. Tell us about what is that?
Alrighty, so PT-109, the acronym PT stands for Patrol Torpedo Boat,
Oh,
and
not a cool
it,
little car.
yeah,
Not a cool little car.
exactly. Yeah, so they were these small attack boats. Oddly enough, they were constructed mostly of plywood, but they were smaller than a destroyer, but bigger than a typical fast attack gunboat. And their primary mode of operation was to rely on stealth and speed. And what these boats would do is, using torpedoes as their primary armaments, they would sneak up on larger enemy ships, fire off a few torpedoes, and they would either disable or destroy the ship, and then sneak out under the cover of darkness and try to escape detection. So PT boats, they served in all theaters of the war, and they were most active, I think, and probably this was the theater where they got a lot of the publicity, was in the Pacific. And you know, you had all of these patrol torpedo squadrons that were scattered throughout the Pacific Islands, and one of them just so happened to be PT 109 among the many that were operating there in the Southwest Pacific. And this was the boat that a young Lieutenant Junior Grade John F. Kennedy found himself in charge of. You know, despite all the health problems that he had, and despite initially not being approved for sea duty, through a roundabout way, he was able to get approved to be the skipper of one of these PT boats. And as fate would have it, in the middle of 1943, he's on a night patrol because these PT boats, they typically operated at night. He was on a night patrol looking for any marauding Japanese ships to try to torpedo, to try to destroy. And as the other boats in the squadron, scattered out along their patrolling and surveillance route, out of nowhere, this one Japanese destroyer comes barreling out of the darkness, and it's headed right for PT-109. Well, JFK, for his part, tries earnestly to steer PT-109 out of the way and try to line it up for a shot, but it's too late. The Japanese destroyer rams PT-109, it T-bones it, and splits Kennedy's boat in half. Well, one half sinks, and the other half stays afloat. And Kennedy is thrown flat on his back, and he regains his senses very quickly, though, calls out into the night to see how many of his crewmen are still alive. And meanwhile, the Japanese destroyer just steams off into the distance, apparently unaware that it had just rammed an American boat. But they found out years later that the Japanese crew knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
So Kennedy, he calls out into the night, and of the 12 crewmen that were supposed to be with him, 10 of them respond. So the other 2 were killed during the collision. But he helps the surviving crewmen back onto the one half of PT-109 that is still afloat. And he's taken his assessment of the situation, and he says, okay, well, some of my guys are badly burned. I'm certainly injured right now. We have one half of our boat that's at the bottom of the Pacific right now, and I don't know how much longer this other half is going to stay seaworthy. So the sun starts to come up, and then off in the distance, he spots an island. And, just by his rough estimate, he could say, okay, I'm guessing that's about 2 miles out in the distance there. Guys, we're going to have to make a swim for it. And, most of the men are in good enough condition to where they can swim, but there's that one sailor who's burned so badly that he can't move at all at this point, even to save his life. And JFK says, well, hey, we're Americans. We don't leave our people behind. So what he does is JFK takes the man's life jacket, takes the strap of the life jacket. JFK puts the strap in his teeth, and he literally pulls this guy through the water with his teeth while he's swimming 2 miles out to this island.
Amazing.
He's easily pulling a guy who at least weighs 150 pounds at the lightest, and he's pulling him by the strap of his life vest in his teeth for a 2-mile swim in the South Pacific. I mean, that is a superhuman feat. If you pull that off, I don't care who you are a Banff.
Yeah.
You really are.
See, I vote for him.
So Kennedy gets all of his men to the island, and so he gathers up all of his folks and says, okay, well, okay, what now, coach? So he swims out to a few other islands and doesn't have any luck at first, but then he runs into some of the native fishermen who travel between the islands in their canoes. And he knows that these native fishermen are friendly towards the Americans. So, he takes a coconut shell, takes his knife, he carves a message into the coconut shell that says, hey, this is Kennedy, I'm alive. I'm here with the crew of PT-109. This native, he knows my position and he can guide you back here. So he gives that coconut to the native fisherman, and that native goes out to the naval base that's at Rendon. He drops the coconut off, and they're like, "Oh my God, Kennedy's still alive!" So that's how the rescue mission ends up happening. And so Kennedy is awarded for valor. And oddly enough, this is something that I've always been fascinated by. Is that coconut shell that he gave to the native, Kennedy kept that with him for the rest of his life. And throughout his presidency, that coconut shell was on his desk in the Oval Office.
That's cool.
Wow. I did not know that.
But it just shows so much heart and soul and goodness and responsibility and forward thinking. And that's what I personally want as a president. I don't want somebody who says they went to business school or they did this or they did that. I want somebody who actually did something and shows who they are. And when you're looking at the military, I think if there's one place you're going to find out who you are, it's going to be in the military.
Mm. What would you say, Mike? You were in the military.
Right.
Mhm.
I would be more likely to vote for someone who had been in a situation like that.
Mhm.
And just where they've been in a high stakes situation and they've been able to produce good outcomes from it.
Mhm.
That to me means more than any degree from any Ivy League school.
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think to me, I think about like we have all these world conversations, these global issues like Russia and everything. So yeah, so there's the business side, right? That is
Yeah.
important. Um, oh, we got to watch what's happening with oil. We have to watch all these things. It's a true thing. Um, but tactics, you just don't you have there's tactics in business, right? But there's tactics in war. It's not just like just go blow someone up or just go do this. That
Mhm.
word just, just do this. And
Strategy.
yeah, there's strategy involved. I mean, think about when Osama bin Laden was taken out, right?
Right.
That wasn't, how long did that take with strategy to do?
A long
And
time.
yeah, a long time, right? It's
Uh-huh.
not just, hey, and then, you could have a president who has no idea about any of that and just says, oh, just, go in there and blow this and that up and not knowing, you know what I mean? That doesn't understand that strategy because maybe we're looking at business, maybe we're looking at the environment, which, I'm hugely about, but at the same time, I'm going, we've got to balance it all. So it's important that, I don't know. It's just important. I think
Well,
you understand strategy more when you're on the ground, like you were saying, being on the ground and or in the boat, right?
Mhm.
if
You
your chief
enjoy.
job as the commander in chief, you're
I'm
going to
not trying to be
command
political, but I am.
no, but if you're going to command our armed forces, I really honestly believe you should have served.
Right.
But you know something about what you're talking about. I don't know
Mm.
how it's like sending somebody in to bake a cake that's never seen an oven.
Mhm.
Good luck with that one. You know,
Someone left the cake out in the rain.
exactly. So to me, I just always feel like the people who run for office, especially when you get into the higher offices, should have served in the military because you
Do
are
you
in charge of our armed forces. How can you be in charge of something that you don't know anything about?
do you think it can help to bridge the gap between parties if you've served?
I think it would help. I think it would go a long way, really.
Yeah,
Mm.
I kind of think it does because I think that everyone claims something about military in their party, but it's like, you know what? Um, I've been there. I look at John McCain, right? I know there was some bad stuff that was said by a president about John McCain, and that to me just, John McCain served, and he was in a
Mhm.
POW camp, and to me, you should listen to him on those experiences that he had, and no matter what party you belonged in, you should maybe lend an ear to that experience, just like you should any
Mhm.
veteran um, who has been in a POW camp and served. And so
Right.
I thought he was kind of trashed and dis dishonored,
Mhm.
but he
Yeah.
still kept going. And I don't know. It's like when you go to vote, like you go, this guy's been through real hell versus
Mhm.
half of America in some ways. I'm not saying half of Americans have not gone through hell. We've been through hell in all kinds of ways. Everybody has a different circumstance, but being in a POW camp back then, that's hell.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm inclined to agree 100%. His experience as a survivor warrants a strong degree of reverence. And, I think it
Mhm.
would have been, I think it would have been a lot more tasteful to, say, well, hey, we are remembering the legacy of a man who had a great amount of fortitude, and we admire his courage and we admire his patriotism. We may have disagreed on politics from time to time, but hey, no two human beings are going to agree 100% of the time on 100% of the issues.
Exactly.
We still want to honor his legacy for what he's been through and what he was able to endure, because you know, who's to say that any one of us would have even handled it or could have handled it to the degree that he did, you know?
Exactly. You
Yeah.
have to have some respect for those who serve. I just, I
Period.
don't know.
Yeah.
I get
I
a
know.
little,
It's really hard about it because I think we get so flippant on our political ideals instead of actually hearing the story, really listening, and we get emotionally charged. And I think that's one thing that is something that if you've served and you're in real battle, you do have that charge. Like you could charge yourself to get up that those steps like Rocky, right?
Mhm.
But emotion plays in that, right? There's all of that stuff. But if you get emotionally charged too much, you can't focus and do what you need to do, the task at hand, right?
Right.
And so that's what I feel our country is kind of going in that way, where we get emotionally charged because of what we think we want to know or know, and become very biased over. It's flippant. And when
Right.
someone has served and been in war, you may want to step back and listen, because
and listen.
at some point they knew real fear, they knew real courage, they knew all of those emotions, but it's a very strong emotion. And I'm not saying emotions are wrong. I'm not saying everybody has a different thing. Everybody has a different story. Absolutely. But when we talk about going to war, to have a president that has been in the dirt,
Mhm.
seen blood, gone through it, seen what death is, you're going to weigh that trigger a little bit differently of when to pull it. It just is. You're going to weigh it differently. If you've been there, you may pull it quicker than somebody else. You may take it slower, but you've been there and understand that. And I think that's a thing. I want to go to George Washington, since
Mhm.
President's Day was started because of him, by the way. Got to look
Yeah.
at that. And then, we've got Lincoln in there too. Who was the smarts? Like, it would have been cool if George Washington and Lincoln just hung out together a little bit, Like, I know, I'm just saying, if
Right.
if George Washington could have been working for Lincoln, it would have been interesting. Like, because Lincoln's kind of the brains dude. Washington was the let's go do it dude. What do you think? You know what I mean? Like,
It would have made a good team.
they would have been a good couple, to run a country with the
Yeah.
brains, the smarts, the brawn, and strategy. Because Washington had strategy, didn't he?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I think they would have made an incredible working team. And that
Yeah.
actually reminds me of a painting that I saw years ago. And I was still in grade school when I saw it, but when I saw it, it really struck me as, hey man, that would have been epically cool if it happened. It was a painting of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln shaking hands,
Oh,
and it was in the context. If I'm remembering the caption correctly, it was in the context of saying, "Hey, the father of our country meets the savior of our country, and we should thank these two guys for making America
mm,
what it is today." Um,
wow.
yeah, so
That's
Cool.
powerful.
and that got me thinking. Even the young kid that I was at the time, I was like, man, what would it be like if those two actually met in
Yeah.
real life and solve some kind of problem together? I was like, man, it'd be like that would be
The
your
ultimate.
unstoppable force for good or something.
Hmm.
That would have been, I mean, because even in war and in strategy and communication, and then if we had Benjamin Franklin hang in there too for
Right.
communication, then we'd have it made, man. But so that's what's hard about it. It's like you have presidents that are really good at some stuff. I mean, and some that just, that's the hard thing. That's why I don't think it could be one, when we look at leadership, it can't just be one person. Like you can't fight a war on your own. You have to have a team. Um,
Right.
yeah. I mean, it's good that we're talking about all this with presidents and JFK and all these, John McCain, and no, he wasn't president, but I mean, he was close. But you look at, no one can do anything without somebody helping somewhere down the road. Not one thing. I mean, there's some real heroic things that someone's done, but still, there's no way you can ever claim anything as 100% your own, I don't think, in life.
No.
You see so much as you're growing up.
Wouldn't you say the military kind of teaches you that too?
Well, in a way, yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, I will say yes and no, because my experiences, and I know that these experiences have been shared by others, is that, on the one hand, there's an effort to try and instill a lot of teamwork. And, there's a recurring mantra that you'll hear throughout any number of the Army courses you go through about how to cooperate and graduate, and that, teamwork makes the dream work. But at the same time, you always get those very skewed type A personalities who really want to hog the glory and, elevate themselves because they're too drunk on the power, and they want that self-gratification, and they need to satiate that feeling of self-importance, and they do it at the expense of not only their peers but those who serve underneath them. So you really see, I guess the broadest stroke that I can paint is that you see the best and the worst of humanity at the same time whenever you're in a military unit. I think that's amplified more so just being the nature of the beast. The military is its own culture. It has its own dynamic, and it attracts certain personality types, and certain personalities tend to thrive there more than they do elsewhere. But you really do see both sides of the extremes. You see the push for teamwork, and then the toxic glory sometimes rising to the top.
Yeah, we see that in business, right?
But that's people. That's
people.
That's people.
Yeah, you see it in business, you see it in politics, right?
Yeah.
I have friends that went into politics and they're like, screw it, I'm out. Because no matter what, you're going to get your hands dirty, period. And, dirty in that you have to get your hands dirty and then you lose your integrity. So it's a very sad thing to see today, that you actually can't just go run and do a good job as a public servant anymore.
I think I don't think you can, a certain level.
It's really difficult.
Then you have to have so much money, which means you start doing favors,
Yeah, exactly. And so I have friends that just said, that's it. I'm not going to go that far with this. I'll do my volunteer work. I'll do this and that. And I think we have to, I think that, past presidents have shown us some good lessons, good and bad, right? George Washington, I think, was a badass. I know he owned slaves. I do not think that was great at all. I do not think it's cool. None of us want that. But history has that. And it's very difficult. And Mike, you teach history. How do you battle that ground of, okay, we still need to learn this stuff. And this dude may have done some really good stuff over here, but he was like doing this over there that we don't like. So how do we do that? I mean, even John Muir is not 100% cool, because like we're talking about, the human nature is not, we're just not all that great, people, and yet we can achieve to be, we can try and do everything we possibly can, but humans are imperfect. So
Right.
how did we balance this? Like George Washington had slaves, but then he was this amazing badass leader in the war, and same as Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, all of these guys who really did do some amazing things, but at the same time did some terrible things by owning slaves, etc. On that level. Like honestly, how do we do this? How
Well,
do we? Yeah.
yeah. The thing that I have told any number of the students that I've taught in any number of the undergrad classes that I've directed, is just to say this: look, we as human beings, we are fallen by nature. We are not perfect. Now, we strive to be good, and we strive to have the good things we do outweigh the bad things, but you know you really can't get away from the fact that even people who do great things are going to be flawed in some form or fashion. Okay.
Mhm.
you know uh, Nobody is perfect. The only perfect guy
Right.
who ever lived, he died on a cross more than 2,000 years ago. So what we have to do is, when we're studying history, okay, we have to take the good with the bad, and we have to acknowledge that, yeah, there were good people out there who did some very questionable things, but look at the picture as a whole. Look at the outcome of the good things that they did. If we can say that
Mhm.
the good qualitatively outweighs the bad, look, let's not miss the forest for the trees here, people.
Right.
Let's focus on the good things that were done, and that are the good things that were facilitated by this person. But yet at the same time, we can still acknowledge, well, yeah, he had these undesirable characteristics here. I mean, because guess what? He's human. Now let's
Mhm.
acknowledge the characteristics, but let's not focus on that small speck, that comparatively small speck of a character flaw, and let that outweigh all the qualitative good that this person has accomplished throughout their lifetime. That's not prudent. And if you do focus on that, then that tells me on some level, A, you lack empathy, and B, you're just trying to do a hatchet job because you have some axe to grind, and you have some unresolved, you know, emotional issue that you're trying to deal with.
Well, you're not going to like anybody for
Yeah.
you're just not going to be supportive of anyone
It's
if
it's
you're
very
Right.
looking.
it's
You
very
know, if you're
difficult.
looking for someone perfect, I'm sorry, it ain't happening.
Well,
Right.
because I mean, every culture has owned slaves, right? Every
That's right.
single
Well,
culture in some place has owned slaves in some way. And I mean, even look what we do to animals, having lions in a zoo. Okay, come on. It's a slave, animal slavery, so it's we've all done bad, and I am not, I'm sorry, but slavery was terrible. I don't know where that
I
came
agree.
from, who decided that stuff, but that's some sick and twisted stuff. Trying to watch my language, but it it's really hard because I think people have a right to be pissed about it, and absolutely, should, but we should learn from it.
Mhm.
We need to look at it. We can't close an eye to it, right? So we can
Right.
look at the good stuff someone's done, like Thomas Jefferson, and look at the bad stuff and say, okay, let's learn from the good and try and emulate that in our lives. And let's not do that over there. That's kind of how I look at it. It's like that over there sucked. Now let's not do that. Let's not replicate that. And let's try and make some good on it, and not, we don't we can make some good over harm that has been done. I think we can, but I don't believe we ignore it. I don't believe we ignore history on either side, good, bad, or the ugly. And the reality is most history is gray, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
all
there
because it
is a
deals
lot
with
of great stuff about our history.
Hmm.
There's we have, I mean, like, we can point to any time period in history and say, hey man, this thing right here was a triumph of mankind. And you can at the same point in history say, well, hey, here was this other stuff that was going on that was,
Mhm.
not at all acceptable. I mean, society evolves and views change, and people, get a more, I'll say they get they'll get a more intense and a deeper view of consciousness and a strengthening of their moral base, but and at the same time we have to be mindful that we're actually evolving and we are not devolving into immorality that is disguised as progress. I mean, I mean, even in the short lifetime that I've had, I mean, comparatively short, I guess I'm close to approaching what most generations would call middle age, but
Stop
even in my
it,
short
Mike. Just stop it. Don't use that.
funny.
I don't want to hear about it.
Lisa, it breaks my heart to say it, but I gotta
Don't use the middle age. Look, I don't want to go to the Middle Ages, right? See, the Middle Age word, that term. Listen, the Middle. We didn't have. Now we do, and so it's okay to be middle aged because we have toilets now. So
at the end of the day,
okay, well,
people.
that is actually the prime of our lives. But I mean, like, I can remember things that were commonplace. I can remember things that were commonplace and things that were acceptable
that
in
aren't
the 90s that are a taboo and a half today. So I mean, all of those microevolutions are going to keep on happening.
I like that you say that, microevolution.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Well, thank you.
Well, we mature in our minds and our hearts and souls at a regular pace. Some of us go the other way. So it isn't surprising to look back at history and find all sorts of things that we feel is wrong.
I think Mike is really right about this microevolution. It's a Mike and his microevolution,
because
you're right.
We evolved. Don't forget, we kind of started out as cavemen. You were more maybe.
Oh boy, don't start. We're gonna get in trouble.
No. Well, no. If you looked at how we lived when we first came here, dropped whatever you want to say, people. I don't want to go there, but
yeah, we're gonna get in trouble.
We have evolved over the years. With that, we've learned things, and we've learned to be more empathetic, and we've learned not to always be offensive and not to always be on the offensive, but we've also learned that we have to be able to defend. And I always look at the president's job. His or hers number one job is to defend this country. And if you don't know how to do it, I don't think you should be president. I mean, it seemed really simple to me, and I'm sure people disagree, but it just seems to me, I don't want somebody working on my car unless they're a mechanic. I'm sorry. It just seems sensible that if you're going to defend this country, that you have served. So you really know what you're talking about. Because I don't want a mechanic who calls in somebody else. I mean, I know they get specialists.
That would be a dealership.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And also, the heart and soul of somebody who has served, it's different than someone who just pushes papers around, who hasn't served. The heart and soul.
Yeah, the paper pushers. We don't like you.
Yeah, no, you put your life on the line.
I don't care
in defense
what we're
of something.
But anybody who is a paper pusher, no,
you're
not living life.
The people who put their life on the line to defend something they believe in, to me, is the kind of person that should be in office, not someone who happens to talk good, look at the TV camera, always wear this color tie,
kiss a baby and go hunt.
The kiss,
go kill an animal.
No, I want somebody who's got some heart and soul, who really believes in what they're doing. And that is, to me, that's what
true honor.
These are the people who represent us. I don't want someone who represents me that doesn't have a clue and is out for their own glory. I don't want that.
Mike, with what Nancy's talking about, and I want to go back to the microevolution thing. I think that is super freaking cool because I think that's just for even just day-to-day life, people can understand that it's not all in one chapter, right?
Right.
But going to what Nancy was saying, I don't think a president necessarily has to have gone to war, but they actually have to understand service,
Military.
Right.
right? Military
Mhm.
service. Like they could have gone through boot camp and served, but maybe there wasn't a war at the time. You know what I mean?
That's
Or they were maybe a mechanic on a tank or something. So um I kind of want to clarify that part. What are your thoughts on how far it should be for a president? I mean, George Washington, I want to go back to his story because that's where the badassery really started, right? As a
Yeah.
president, as a leader, because our country was kind of like founded on that, right? I mean, the Native Americans, this was their land first. And so I
Mhm.
just want to acknowledge them. And so we came in and decided to like bulldoze our way
okay.
through and then say, oh, British are coming, we're British, but screw you. Um, so can we go to George Washington, what he did, and then go to now what Nancy's talking about presidents running, and why it's important that they're in military service. So if we look at George Washington, our first president, as an example.
Right. Well, if you're going to be commander in chief of the armed forces, I think on some level you need to know what that lifestyle is like. You need to know what the culture is like, and you need to know everything that goes into what makes military operations
Mhm.
are what they are. You need to know what's at stake. You need to know that when you give those orders and when you put somebody or when you potentially put somebody in harm's way, what the downstream effects of that are going to be. Because
Mhm.
once you have that understanding, it puts you on a metaphysical level that someone who hasn't served, they just won't understand it. They won't
Mm.
be as in tune culturally as as you are if you have served. And
Mm.
it's really just a matter of experience. You can't really know what it's like in the ins and outs of it unless you've experienced it. And since being president carries with it such an enormous responsibility in that regard, to have that level of power and control over the military, there has to be some military service there to
Mm.
begin with, to have what I would even
Mhm.
call a baseline degree of competency, and
Exactly.
it doesn't have to be somebody who was fighting in a foxhole on the front lines. It could be
No,
someone who, served and wore the uniform and at least knew what the day-to-day operations entailed.
right. It's
Mm.
like going to have surgery and the doctor says, "Oh, I've never done surgery before, but I got this great book.
Yeah,
I'm out." You know,
right.
bye-bye. You know, seriously,
Yeah.
it's about really knowing and having, I don't know the word, the passion to do the right thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
really just having the technical know-how, in a lot of cases. I mean, I wouldn't want to get on a plane with the pilot who says, well, I've played a lot of Microsoft Office Flight Simulator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Or
I
yeah.
played Pac-Man.
Yeah,
Or
Pac-Man.
I went on that Disneyland ride where you get to pilot your own little plane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. But okay, so can you tell people the story of George Washington?
yeah. So here was a guy who, I mean, really understood military operations to a level that few of our leaders, I think, ever would. Yeah, because long before the Americas were even talking about independence, he got his experience. He got his experience in combat as a young 30-something, as a member of the Virginia militia in the French and Indian War. Yeah, as a matter of fact, his expeditions into the wilderness and attacking and probing French forts many historians will tell you that he's pretty much the reason why the French and Indian War started. But you
Oh,
know,
wow.
a guy who owned his skills in combat on the frontier. I mean, that right there was a solid foundation upon which, you know, he could build and grow as a military leader. And, you know, separate and apart from that, to rise to the occasion when the Continental Congress appointed him commander in chief, and to be in the right place at the right time, and, you know, to pull off these victories against the British, which, you know, many historians to this day can only call a miracle. You know, that really is
Mm.
nothing short of amazing. And, you know, you want people that at least have some semblance of an experience like that. Now, you know, and at the same time, we have to admit that, George Washington did have his setbacks as a commander. As a matter of fact, the war was not going well for anybody until the Battle of Saratoga. And that was in 1777 that finally kicked off. And, you know, the outcome of the war was still in question, really even until Cowpens in Yorktown. And, you know, it was after the latter, you know, that the British finally surrendered. So, to be able to maintain that momentum despite having those setbacks in the equation, I think is also a testament to, you know, how someone can, learn from failure quickly on the fly while everything is still going at 100 miles an hour.
Wow. That's a huge point. That's a huge point, because life is what's happening when you're busy making other plans. You know, that is life. I mean, failure leads to success, right? It's
Yeah.
and you've got to just keep plowing forth and not drown in the failure. And it
Right.
sounds like he didn't allow that to happen. He didn't allow it to drown. He was like, no, keep going.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The only way is through. And
Yeah.
so he goes, the whole thing with the French, I forgot all about that part of his history for some reason. I don't know. I did. But then he really persevered beyond that. So that's where he started. I mean, it's an interesting time because we were just becoming a country at that point. We weren't even quite, I mean, we're still just running around going, we're trying to settle. The Indians are here. What are we going to do to them? You know, that's really how we were, right? And there's it seems like it was a lot of fear going on, prior to the Revolutionary War and the British. And, when you're talking about the French and the Indians and everything, there was a lot of fear because everything was new in this country to those who had come here, other than the indigenous people who knew the land. There was a lot of fear from the white people, basically. And that creates even more war, doesn't it? Fear.
Well, it can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I mean, fear can lead to war, and history certainly bears that out. Fear can also, I mean, I think a healthy dose of fear can sometimes
Yeah,
lead
save
to,
your ass.
I think it can avoid catastrophes, and
Mhm.
it can also prompt good, outside of the box thinking to create long lasting diplomatic solutions to things. But yeah, I mean, fear. I think you're right. I think the right amount of fear and loathing has historically led to any variety of wars happening.
Mhm. Yeah.
Agree. Huh. So George Washington was our first dude. He really was. And then tell us about the story of him riding on the Revolutionary War. Didn't he do like some big ride that kind of put everything in perspective? Like when he first got. Do you know
You
what
talk
I'm?
about Paul Revere.
I
I think you're
always think
talking
Paul
about
Revere.
Paul
I'm thinking
Revere.
about. This is why we
Yeah.
need a history teacher on the show.
Yeah,
Listen, I was raised in South Africa. I'll tell you what happened
okay.
with Shaka Zulu. Okay, that's
Yeah.
it. That's all my history. That's where it
Yeah.
starts and stops. No, but it is Paul Revere. You're right. Yeah,
Mhm.
but okay, so that's not presidential then. I thought George Washington did a famous ride. So Yeah, I got my history mixed up. Sorry.
That's funny.
Well, what was this? Well, tell me the story. What is Paul Revere? Oh, so why? Oh, I have to go back east. See, this is the
Okay.
thing.
Paul
All right.
Revere is going, the British are coming, the British.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I thought George Washington did some big fancy ride and did something to save us the same way, like the same kind of story as Paul Revere, but I got him twirled around. That's okay. I'm allowed to be, mistaken. I am human. See, but
yeah.
I'm not running for president. You're all saved. So, Mike, which story is it? Like, it didn't. I thought
Well,
George
well,
Washington did something like
well,
that.
he gave a very stirring inaugural address and also a departing address. When he became our first president, he set a lot of traditions that have since been carried over by every other president since. It's nowhere written in the Constitution that a president has to give an inaugural address, but George Washington started that tradition, and every president has done it ever since. Swearing on a Bible, and when after taking the oath, saying "So help me God." That those are all of GW's doings. He also warned about the dangers of political parties. He said, "Look, we've seen party politics in Europe. We saw it with Great Britain. Let's not make the same mistake they did. Let's just rule based on good old fashioned common sense." But we saw how well that's turned out.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas Paine, look at him with the Common
Mhm.
Sense book.
Right.
Oh my gosh. I think Thomas
Mm.
Paine is interesting as heck too.
Yeah.
But then I don't know who Paul Revere is half the time, right? So no, but
Mm.
I'm just kidding. But Paul, okay. Can you just tell me the Paul Revere story, please?
Okay.
Because now it's going to bug me all night and I'll have to
All
Google
right.
it. And it's not as cool as Mike Guardia telling the Paul Revere story.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's an even cooler rendition. I believe it was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow who did that. He did that poem, the famous Ride of Paul Revere.
Mm.
Actually, I don't know if that's the title of it, but he did write a poem about Paul Revere, and it's that one. It's even been made into a few children's books. It's like, "Come ye children, and you will hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere."
Paul Revere, yeah.
Oh,
Mm.
And it tells about Paul Revere getting on horseback and riding throughout the countryside and the streets, saying, to arms, the British are coming." That was a clarion call
that's
to
right.
the Minutemen to get their rifles and stop the advancing British. And Paul Revere was going to make that ride, and he was waiting for a signal from the clock tower. There were going to be it was going to be a lantern signal, and the person who was in the belfry was going to have a signal, one if by land and two if by sea.
Two if I see, yeah.
Yeah. And so then after getting that signal, that's when he went on his ride and rallied the Minutemen to take up their arms. So without giving too much of the story away, that'll be the teaser that I give. And there's a number of children's book adaptations of that poem, and even quite a few interesting YouTube videos that you could do in that regard.
Well, thank you. Yes, I do remember now. Like I thought, I don't know why I got Washington mixed up with that, but I did, and that's okay. And at the same time, I thought John Adams had to do with something with that ride. I don't know. I thought John Adams did a big ride. I think maybe everything was a big ride back then, right?
You thought
Horseback
everybody
in the
went for a
winter.
ride?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's like everyone is always on a big ride somewhere to go save the day, but that's the way life was then. Now we just get in a car, or like in Mike's instant, Mike gets in a tank. But, and we've seen some tanks lately. Oh my gosh, Mike. Okay, we have to have tank talk at some point. We have to do that. Hopefully we will see you soon. But Mike, again, thank you for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. I know we always go into the deep end, don't we? But today, I think, you can't talk history without the present, and the present doesn't exist without the past. So this is what is so important about what we talk about. And looking at history is always important, and what people have done in the past for where we are in the present, and hopefully continuing to be free in all regards. Freedom is a
Mhm.
big word, but it's also a life.
Mhm.
And so it's not just another word. It isn't. Even if Bobby McGee, that song says freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. No, that's not true. So everyone, Coyote Recon, The Forgotten Wars of Colonel J.D. Vanderpool is out now by Mike Guardia. Go get it. Mike, what's next? I know you're working on another book. I know it. I can feel it. 26 is coming. I feel it. I
Of
feel it.
course.
The earth
Well,
is shaking.
juggling. I'm actually juggling a few different projects at the moment. So it's a question of which one of these will be 26 as a function of which one I finish first.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, I will let two out of the bag. One is a story involving combat engineers in Vietnam, and the other is on the spy war in Bosnia during the mid 90s.
Dude,
Ooh,
man, you're
wow.
getting into modern history. Good stuff. Good
Mhm.
stuff. Everyone, MikeGuardia.com is where to go, and keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Mike is here every first Monday for our Military Monday show. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, ladies. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
You take care.